and you guys do a lot of advocating and talking to people in Washington. I see that all over the AFP website and pictures there. And Glenn, you take a good picture there on the Hill. Let me tell you.
Hey, thanks.
What has been the response to legislators when you talk to them, particularly about this issue, and also about things like the patient-centered medical home when you talk to legislators about that concept?
Sure. Well, I have to back up and tell you we have an excellent photographer in D.C. Jim Arvantis is a reporter and photographer, and for every one picture that turns out, there's 100 that are just really terrible, Mike. But anyway, our issues are really well received when we meet with staff and members of Congress. I think that our effort, not just by our leadership, but especially by the grassroots efforts of our key contacts and people who attend our Family Medicine Congressional Conference, and I'll put in another shameless plug, May 13th and 14th, our Family Medicine Congressional Conference in D.C. involves advocacy training and then Hill visits. That success over the years has really educated people about our issues and has really helped distinguish family physicians and what we're about as far as what's best for patients in our healthcare system from the perception of other subspecialties, some of it earned, especially in some specialties, as being simply more self-serving about their own interests. I think people generally perceive our academy as a thought leader in health policy and health system reform, while not sacrificing in any way at all, because they're absolutely synergistic, what are the interests for our primary care physicians? Because without adequate payment for primary care physicians, we won't have enough of them, we won't be able to transform our practices, and we won't attract enough new, family physicians to our specialty.
And I can't talk about lobbying without talking about and asking you about Medicare and the SGR and the sustainable growth rate and when you guys go up on the Hill, and you talk to legislators, what kind of feedback do you get, from them? Is this something that's that they really want to take care of in a long-term fashion? Is it something that they just want to kick the can down the road or leave it to another Congress to do? Because sitting here at home at the grassroots, it's very frustrating, reading these stories and seeing what's really going on behind closed doors. And you guys go up there and do a lot of lobbying and legislating. What kind of feedback are you getting from legislators when you talk to them about Medicare SGR?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mike. I think they're as frustrated talking about it as we are, and I do think that there's general support for a long-term replacement to the SGR with some alternate means of determining physician payment going forward, but it's simply a collateral damage of the really hyper-partisanship in Congress, and I point the finger at both parties equally in that. I think that too often they let those partisan politics get in the way of doing the work that they were elected to do. And it is hard work, to figure out in our current deficit and budget environment where you're going to erase $300+ billion in accrued debt and avoid having it continue to accrue is just a challenge. But if they don't fix it, it's just a cancer that keeps growing in our healthcare system and in our federal budget. It's just got to be fixed.
And I know you guys will be talking about this at the Family Medicine Congressional Conference, May 14 and 15, 2012. Get more information on aafp.org.
Date's right.
Yeah, I just did my little Google search. Are you aware of, or is the Academy getting feedback from members, especially when this SGR comes up again and saying I am not going to be taking Medicare patients as of January 1st? Is that something that the Academy hears about, or is it just hearsay or rumors? Or I'm just kind of curious about what the Academy hears when that stuff happens.
Well, I think that's another area, Mike, where we're really actively listening. We did a member survey, it was about a year and a half ago at the time when the cut was going to be 25 or 26%. asking those questions basically so we could use it in our lobbying efforts. What would be the consequences? Because what Medicare tells Congress currently is that people with Medicare insurance don't have enough trouble finding a physician that it's a problem. And you and I know that's not always true in parts of the country, and particularly for primary care. So this was a September 2010 survey, and the number that just sticks in my head is nearly 13% of our members found that they had enough of their book of business for their practice that was Medicare, that if a 26% cut went in, that their practice would be non-viable and would likely close. And so then it's not just Medicare patients no longer getting care in that clinic. It's whoever else gets their care there. And if it's in a small town, it's everybody for whatever region around that town. And that number resonates with people when we talk with them. So in Congress, but we do hear from our members about how they're struggling with this SGR, and we're, as a professional association, encouraging our members to transform to the patient-centered medical home model, and we're getting understandable pushback when people say, how can I do that when at the end of 2012 I'm potentially facing a 32% cut in Medicare payment? And that's, again, the message we get to Congress. They are increasingly understanding the need for a very solid family medicine, primary care foundation to the healthcare system, but they can't do it with that sort of uncertainty. And the other thing I would add is we call on our members often. In fact, I sometimes feel badly about how often we have to call on them to contact their members of Congress because they, like you said, they kick this can down the road for short periods of time. But I've just been incredibly proud of our members and how they've stepped up when called upon to put pressure on their members of Congress to fix this. And it's discouraging when you put that effort in and you don't see immediate return, but this is an incremental process, and I think our members are having an impact. And I'll tell you, other professional organizations have reached out to our academy and said, how did you get your members to do that? Because they just have tremendous respect for how our members engage on issues like this.
Yeah, what do you? I mean, I talk to members all the time, and just saying I'm frustrated, and I try to reach out and contact my local U.S. congressperson or try to get in touch with our U.S. senator, or even at the state level, at the state house, and they're very frustrated. What do you tell members in saying, hey, why should I do this? It's very frustrating to me. I'm not really seeing the results that I'm getting. Why should I continue to be legislative or try to be legislatively active at a state and federal level?
Yeah. On last night's broadcast, Mike, I heard you talk about, the joy you get out of practice, even though it's frustrating sometimes. And personally, for me, it's channeling that frustration into a positive direction. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing as AAFP president. You're right. You don't see the return right away. But I'm just not one of those people, and I don't think the bulk of our members are, that can just sit there and say, hey, the system sucks, and not do anything about it. And so I just tell people they have to go in with a positive frame of mind. They have to be realistic in how long they think it might take to achieve their goal, and take some satisfaction in fighting the good fight, and realize if they're not there lending that voice for primary care on behalf of patients, somebody else is there giving the voice to that member of Congress or legislator that doesn't have the patient or our best interests at heart. Our PAC, one more shameless plug, to support our political action committee. Our PAC always uses the quote, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And there's some real truth to that in the way that politics works. And it's not necessarily right, but it's just simply the way the process works. And I just think we've got some incredibly engaged members that do a great job of relating the personal story. And this is the key to advocacy, is if you're meeting with a member of Congress or your legislator, you got to tell them how whatever situation you're talking about is relevant to their, the people in their district, the people that they are beholden to as voters, because that's who they have to care about.